Donald Trump doesn't believe in win-wins. He only believes that life is full of zero-sum games. You either win or you lose. On one side is the winner and on the other side is a loser. Because of this, he cannot actually see and comprehend a win-win scenario when it's there right in front of him. Because to a large degree, that's what we actually had with the global trading infrastructure and the US and China's position within it up until now. China did a lot of the manufacturing. It took jobs and did things that the rest of the world didn't actually anymore want to do. The labour work and the kind of stuff that Howard Lutnick, his Commerce Secretary, said that he would love to bring back to the US are not jobs that most people in the US actually want. He talked about 1 million people screwing little screws into iPhones. Now, that's the kind of job that China has thrived on doing. Repatriating those to America is not going to find many takers because there are other jobs like that in manufacturing in the US that they can't fill. So in many respects, what they had was a bit of a win-win, where aspects of the economy that weren't easily deliverable or for a decent price that the consumer wants in the US or the West were provided by China. Now Trump instead sees the world through the lens of a zero-sum game, and that's what he's created. He's now gone to war with China on the trading front and wants to win that war. He's made it into a win or lose situation. But unfortunately, in almost every respect, the likely outcome of this is that it's the US that will lose and not China. And there are several reasons for this. First of all, let's look at what Trump has actually done. He's imposed such high tariffs on China, going above 100%, and got the same back from China, that effectively it means that there's a blockade in trade between the two countries. Because once you go above 100%, that means that the price of the goods has suddenly doubled or more. So if you go above 100%, you might as well go up to 1,000%. It doesn't make any difference. It's going to stop trade effectively because retailers will find any other source they can for that same product or material, or sometimes even go without, because doubling the price isn't really in most people's budget. So it's effectively a trade blockade between the two countries. They're both going to starve each other of what they each provide. Now, how is that going to work out? Well, the biggest mistake Trump made is that as well as imposing tariffs on China, he also imposed tariffs on the rest of the world. And the tariffs he imposed on the rest of the world were 10%. Now, that might sound small when compared to China's over 100%, but it only sounds small because we're comparing it to that. In historical terms, and in terms of how trade flowed up until Trump came back into office, it's extremely high. 5% was considered a high tariff rate before that. And so actually, Trump has imposed restrictions on the whole world doing trade with America. And so by default, what that means is that they're going to form their own trading bloc with China, because the frictions between them, the actual cost of buying and selling from each other for the rest of the world, is relatively low now compared to the cost of doing any business with the US. So effectively, he's created a trading bloc in the entire rest of the world, who are going to trade with themselves and China much more easily than they can trade with the US. So Trump, in trying to create a zero-sum game with China, has handicapped himself from the get-go by ensuring that China actually has a lot more easily accessible market in the rest of the world. And so where it may struggle to sell some of its products to the US anymore, it can find other buyers around the world who are going to be forming closer alliances with China as a result. Look, for example, at where Xi Jinping is this week. He's actually gone to Vietnam, where Trump originally announced 45% tariffs. He brought it down later, but they're still extremely high, which means that Vietnam, a relative neighbour of China, is now far more better placed to do business with China than with America. And that's going to happen with countries all around the world, not just in Asia, but across Europe and the South Pacific as well. So that's the first reason that China is likely to lose less than the US. Because let's be sure, a trade war like this doesn't have any actual winners. It's just a case of who loses less. America stands to lose a lot more because it's conducting a trade war with everybody at the same time, whereas China only has that issue with America. Now, it's true that the Chinese economy isn't working on all cylinders and as big a success as it used to be. Its economic growth is down, its unemployment is up, and so yes, they do have difficulties. But the difference is, this time the US will also be going through difficulties. They have been predicted to go into recession by many forecasters as a result of Trump's policies. And then it will be a case of who can tolerate the most pain, the Chinese people or the American people. And I can tell you for sure that historically the Chinese people have endured far more pain than the Americans. They've been prepared to live under far harsher economic circumstances than the Americans have ever imagined in the last century. Even in the lifetime of this generation of Chinese, policies like the one-child policy had been implemented, meaning that it was illegal to have more than one child. People lived under that kind of hardship. It was illegal to live and settle in a town outside the one you were born in. So people often had to live in rural agricultural land and work on the land by law. They weren't allowed to go into the city and do other kind of work. That changed in recent years during its economic revolution, but only in living memory and in the living experience of many Chinese today. They had to live in hardship on the land in their own neighborhood and risk arrest if they tried to go anywhere else or do anything else.
Here's the issue, or the piece of calculus they are missing. When Americans when they're watching the Logan Paul-Mike Tyson fight, and it starts, the bandwidth slows down, they go fucking ape shit, and they call their cable company.
I just did that today.
When you talk about women are born with a much higher tolerance for pain because they have to endure childbirth. Men have much lower tolerance of pain. We're the man in this relationship. China starves tens of millions of people when they think it's good long-term for the country. Do you realize the pain threshold of America relative to China?
Zero.
And we think we're going to strong-arm them?
So this is a nation of people who are prepared to bear the brunt of economic pain if needed, if required by the circumstances they're in, and are likely to capitulate a lot less and a lot later than we will see in America. Now, the other reason China has a stronger hand is because in order for the US to make anything of this, they need to be able to repatriate those manufacturing jobs that are currently in China into the US. They need to actually start producing manufacturing plants and open whole new industries again in the US. In order to do that, they will require a great deal of investment. The government will need to build infrastructure to enable that once more. There would need to be support from the government. The Chinese, for example, give huge amount of government subsidies and support to new manufacturing companies, creating whole manufacturing plants for them in order to become profitable down the line. Trump isn't about to do that. They've not displayed any desire to invest in American infrastructure or support businesses through grants, which the Chinese do all the time. And if they're not prepared to do that, then the investment has to come from outside. But right now, America is the last place anybody wants to invest in. In fact, the traditional things that people used to invest in America, like in the dollar, like in treasury bonds, are actually experiencing flight at the moment. People are avoiding them. American stocks in general are being de-invested in right now. So where's that investment going to come from? Where's that prioritization going to come from? Where's that infrastructure building going to come from to enable those industries that America will have to home grow again to take root once more? There doesn't seem to be any strategy for that, or any scope for it either. Now, the other reason that China is likely to get the upper hand in this conflict is that they also have some other cards to play that the US don't. You see, a lot of US debt is actually held by China. When the US government goes into debt, it issues treasury bonds, and people can buy those bonds on the free market. It's a way of buying US debt. And one of the biggest parties that holds US treasury bonds is actually China. So it's a kind of a deal. China would sell goods to the US would pay for those goods by borrowing from China in order to pay for them. A bit like you might do in a shop if you're buying a car. You might borrow from the car dealer themselves in order to buy the car from them. Now, this means that China holds a lot of US debt. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, a source of acute pain for the US is if the interest on that debt goes up. Now, the interest on that debt only goes up when less people want to buy it. When that debt is being offloaded by various parties who hold it and not enough people want to buy it, then the interest on that debt actually goes up. And when the interest on that debt goes up, it means that US government spending is being crowded out. It means they have less and less money to spend on the rest of the US government, including the military and everything else, Medicare, Medicaid, etc., because they're having to spend more and more on interest. So if China starts offloading US debt, it could lead to a spike in the interest rates on US debt, which would cause severe pain to the US government. In fact, some people hypothesize China may already have started doing that. You see, when stocks started to collapse, when Trump introduced his tariffs, one of the really strange things that happened, as I mentioned in that previous video, was that the yield on treasury bonds, i.e. the interest rate on US debt, went up. And usually when stocks go down, that goes up because people invest in US debt as a safe security during times of uncertainty. But on this occasion, the interest on that debt, the yield actually went up. It meant that someone was selling this debt instead of buying it. And a lot of people speculate that that could have been what China was doing, playing one of its cards to inflict some pain on the US. We don't know, but what we do know is that they can do that. They're capable of doing that anytime they want. So they have that card. They have some other cards, because China is also a big market for big parts of the US economy. Big parts of the US economy rely on China and selling goods to them. One big example of that is Boeing.
With the U.S. says it reportedly orders Chinese airlines to stop taking deliveries of Boeing planes and to not buy the aircraft-related equipment from American companies.
They're being imposed a tariff of up to 145%. Now, what we know this time is that the Chinese government has asked its carriers to stop taking delivery of Boeing aircraft in the meantime.
China has responded in Donald Trump's trade war, halting orders of Boeing aircraft.
US President Donald Trump has remained firm that China must be first to step up to the negotiating table on tariffs. Beijing has reportedly blocked further deliveries of Boeing jets in retaliation to Washington, D.C.
China actually makes up over a quarter of all Boeing sales. So of all the aircraft that Boeing sell, over a quarter of them go to China. That has effectively just been brought to a halt. The tens of thousands of jobs, the billions of pounds of income that America earns from that industry have just been slashed by that one action from China. And there's certainly more where that came from. So this zero-sum game that Trump likes to play, where he wants to create winners or losers, is a game that he's now playing. And it's a game that on many, many fronts, US is poised to lose. And that is the exact reason why so many economic forecasters around the world are now predicting a US recession as a result of Trump's policies. For Trump, it really is a case of being careful what you wish for. Thank you for watching my video. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also interested in philosophy and public policy and politics. I aim to make a number of videos about these subjects, and particularly the intersection between them. If you're able to like and subscribe to this channel, then it'll really help, and also put in some comments whenever you can. That'll really help the algorithm. It'll really help promote this channel to other people. Now, beyond that, we are all, unfortunately, at the behest of a very small number of people who seem to run everything these days. And we are all at the whim of a tech oligarch who could decide tomorrow to end a channel like this because it's not in their favor. And because of that, I've set up a kind of email newsletter, which you can subscribe to. At the top of the channel, you'll see a web address. Please go there and subscribe to my newsletter. That way you can stay in touch with the videos I'm making. At least we can keep the content flowing. So I hope you can do that. And I hope we can keep talking and also gain clarity, not just about what's happening right now, but how we can get through this, how we can improve things to make a better tomorrow together. Thank you.